Hello everyone. This is a video where I want to go over a little bit about what it's like in Japan, because on a lot of forums and whatnot you'll see people asking the question, is Japan dangerous, or how dangerous is Japan, or what is the most dangerous area in Japan, questions like that. And you see a lot of anecdotal answers where people will say, Japan is 100% safe, I've never been robbed, or Japan's not safe because I know someone where something's happened, something like that. You can look at statistics which do show that Japan is very safe, but sometimes people will say, well, perhaps things just aren't being reported. And there may be some truth to that in, for example, lesser crimes. So if you ask most Japanese people, particularly people in the countryside, where is the most dangerous place in Japan, not in terms of natural disasters per se, but for example in terms of violent crimes or robberies or something like that, most likely they will tell you Kabukicho. And so we're going to take a little walk around Kabukicho and have a look. Now, Kabukicho is often called a red light district, which sort of implies that you're going to see lots of sex shops or something like that. That's not really the case. There are, of course, lots of bars, and some of them are, let's say a little risque, something like that. But most of them are actually quite tame, I would say. And there are massage places and strip places and whatnot, but it's not really quite so seedy as you would expect. So Kabukicho is an area inside of Shinjuku. It's right outside Shinjuku Station, and if we're walking around here, this is pretty much the heart of Kabukicho. So, for example, to our left here, this is a karaoke place. It's just a normal karaoke where you can go with your friends and sing songs or whatever. It's not like some of those Southeast Asian countries where karaoke places automatically include girls or anything like that. It's just a regular place where you can rent a room and sing songs. Most of these buildings, most of the shops in there are restaurants. You see here there's a watch shop. Directly ahead of us is this Toho Cinemas building. This is a movie theater. The first floor has some bars and restaurants, and some of the higher floors basically comprise a hotel. This is a sushi place on our left here. If you saw the top of this Toho Cinemas building, there's actually a Godzilla statue up there, which is kind of interesting, but unfortunately you can't see it in this video. Okay, so this says Nozoki Heya. So this is like a kind of a strip club place. Then this part here, this restaurant here, is kind of izakaya on our left. Ahead of us here again you can see karaoke place. Then we keep walking a little bit and you'll see it says Sega here, so this is a video game place on the first floor. Up higher in this building there's actually some restaurants. There's an internet cafe and some other things. You see here it says Warp. That's some kind of dance club apparently. I've never been in there. It's only been around for, let's say, a year or so. And given the corona pandemic, that's not the kind of place I'm really itching to go at the moment. So you can see to our right here, this Toho Cinemas building has a 7-Eleven at the bottom. So this square here, this is actually one of the dirtiest places in Japan that I've seen, because people are always camping out here, daytime, nighttime. They camp out here, they hang out here and eat and drink beer and whatever. So there's usually lots of kind of garbage laying around. I mean, not lots, but like little bits and pieces. So it will be cleaned up like, maybe around lunchtime and look super clean for a while, but then after that it gets progressively dirtier. So we keep going forward a little bit. You can see there's a ramen shop here. There's a coffee shop directly in front of us. Just basically a lot of normal type businesses. I'm not sure what this one is that's boarded up here. There's a couple shops that have been boarded up recently, so they're probably doing renovations to make a new shop. So we see a sign here for Lawson. That is a convenience store. And this larger building, it says Grand Customer. This is an internet cafe, so you can go in here and rent a little booth and play with the computer, or borrow some like manga, comic books to read, or there's actually like baths in there too, so you can use those. Here you see billiard, that's a pool. You'd see this Muryo Annaisho Manzoku. So this is kind of a tourist information center for Japanese people who are looking for certain types of entertainment. So, it's usually going to be girly type places, but, if you say, oh, I want a massage place, or, oh, I want Kabakura, I want a girls bar, whatever it is, you go in there and you say, this is what I'm looking for, and this is my budget, and they'll call around and say, oh, this is a good place for you. Now, of course, they're going to make a commission on it, so if you use that place, you're probably going to be paying more than you would just going by yourself. But, for people from out of town or whatever, and they don't know Kabukicho, then they can go there and sort of get recommendations. Okay, so on our left here, this is a bar. I see a lot of foreigners in this bar sometimes, not as much as like the type of places that English teachers would haunt, but I think it's just because it's on the first floor and it's near the station. On Naijo, this is actually for ladies. This is the same sort of thing, but it's they'll introduce them to host clubs or whatever. This is kind of a Chinese restaurant. Another convenience store. We have this I love Kabukicho sign in front of us. That's only been there a couple years, I think. Curry restaurant. And I'm going to take a left here on this alley because this is where it used to be a really shady spot. There were shops in here that would sell like designer drugs or whatever. The government makes something illegal and then they would change it slightly and release something. But now it's not. Now it's just some little shops. Here's a hookah shop, fortune telling shop. What does this say? Chicken and beer. Yeah, I guess that's very simple, right? There's another bar. And, so this is like a teeny tiny alleyway, like a back alley. And during the day, a lot of this stuff is closed because there's not as many people in Kabukicho during the day. They may be nearby working in office buildings, but they're not hanging out around here. So a lot of the stuff only opens at night. I have some videos riding around here at night on my bike, which you can take a look at. It does look kind of totally different if it's all lit up, but it seems to make sense to show this during the day as well, just to give you a good idea. And this time I'm walking mainly just so that the speed is slow enough I can explain what's going on. So we see there's a hotel there. You can see there's a lot of bikes parked everywhere. There is ample parking for bikes if you don't mind riding around a bit to find it. Here's a ramen shop on the corner here. Okay, so if you look ahead and to the left, you will see these pictures of kind of feminine looking guys. So these are normally signs for host clubs. So if you don't know, in Japan there are hostess clubs or kabakura where like ladies will sit at the table with you and drink with you. Unlike Southeast Asian countries, they literally just sit with you and drink with you. There's nothing more untowards going on, but it still is kind of expensive. You'll pay like probably at least $50 an hour just to sit there and drink with the ladies. And they'll always say, oh, can you buy me a drink? And then there goes 10 or 20 bucks more. So hostess club is basically the same thing, just usually a little bit older ladies. And a host club is sort of the opposite. So it's a shop where guys are there, and usually ladies will be the customers, although not necessarily. We see some more of these Muryo Annaisho, information places. So you can see there's quite a lot of those. Not as many as there are convenience stores, but here's another one, Kabukicho Annaisho. So, the idea is someone from out of town comes into Kabukicho, they see those and say, oh, let me go there. And then they'll have lots of pictures of different shops or girls or whatever. Here's another sushi place. You can see there's a 7-Eleven here. And I can't quite make out what the other shop is. So this is the street where City Hall is, which is kind of entertaining to me that they have all these, slightly suspicious shops right around the City Hall and the police station and whatnot. Here's a parking lot. It's a funny story. When I first came to Tokyo, when I first moved to Tokyo, one of the first things you have to do whenever you move in Japan, whether you're Japanese or foreigner or whatever, is you have to register where you live, so that you can, get your health insurance and, whatever. And, I knew that I had to go to City Hall to do that. And I remember asking some lady, I just went to Shinjuku. I got out of the station and I asked some random lady, like, where is City Hall? And she said, oh yeah, just go up here, turn right, keep walking until you see Mr. Donuts, and then it's on that street. So you'll see the Mr. Donuts in a minute. We just passed this place called Pasela. That is a karaoke place, but it's a rather fancy one, and they actually have good food. So if you're in Tokyo and you want to go to a karaoke place and you don't mind spending a little bit more, I would highly recommend Pasela. Like a lot of the karaoke places, they do have food, but it's really kind of crap quality. So Pasela is actually nice. Like you could take someone there on a date or something, right? So right here, this is the City Hall building, I believe. And yeah, if you go in there, you can update your registration. You can get documents for your, seal, to prove that it's your seal. You can get tax advice or, get various forms to prove your income, all kind of stuff like that. So that's basically all that is. I believe this next building is basically an office building. So you can see here it says no smoking outside. So this is something very different than, for example, the US. Like, as many people know, I went to college in the US, and the last couple years I was there, things really started, that sort of non-smoking movement started to become popular, and a lot of bars and whatnot started banning smoking. So here's the Mr. Donuts. So what people in the US would do is they'd say, a lot of people, they go drinking, they want to smoke. If they're smokers, that's exactly the time when they want to smoke, is when they're drinking. So going to a bar and having them say no smoking is kind of like, well, geez, that ruins the whole experience, right? And so what they would do in the US is they would go outside and smoke. Japan is basically the opposite. You are not allowed to smoke outside in crowded areas, basically like Shinjuku, Shibuya, whatever. They have like local ordinances that say you can't smoke, within X meters from the station. So it might be, 800 meters or whatever. And basically the areas like this where there's a lot of people walking around, you're not allowed to smoke. And the idea is that, well, the secondhand smoke could, affect the people around you, or perhaps more importantly, you could burn someone. Now, nowadays you see most people have like the electronic tobacco, but before that was the case, you got to figure if there's a huge crowd of people and you're walking around with a cigarette, you could very easily burn someone. But on the contrary, inside of a bar or whatever, you're choosing to be there, so you're choosing to be where the smoke is, and so there's no rules around that. Okay, so I'm going to take this little windy road here. This goes to an area called Golden Gai. Golden Gai is one of the areas of Shinjuku that is the oldest, and the reason is that when most of the city was, burned down or bombed or whatever many, many years ago, and rebuilt, this area was basically spared, right? So this is, old little rickety wooden buildings from long ago. And most of them are basically bars. A few of them are restaurants. So it's kind of a cute little, I don't want to say shanty town, but kind of close to something like that. So I think in the West you would call these bars like dive bars. So this first one here that says, what does it say? Jim Beam. This is kind of a foreigner bar. I've never been in there, but there's always a bunch of Africans out front trying to lure people in, and it's all written in English. It's very clearly targeted towards foreigners. And why go to Golden Guy if you're going to go to a foreigner bar, honestly? But anyway, you can see on the left side here, there's lots of little bars. Here's one, here's two, here's three, here's four. A lot of times there'll be one on the first floor, or a different one on the second floor, maybe two or three on one floor. So for each one of these little buildings, there might be, 4 or 5 bars. And most of them only have a capacity, for a few people. So it's a very cozy experience, let's say. So I used to go down here, maybe once or twice a week. And here I'm taking this tiny, tiny alleyway, which I would not do in another country, let's be honest, especially at nighttime. But it's perfectly fine. I haven't been in this area recently just because, with the whole corona pandemic, the last thing you want to do is go in a really small room with a bunch of people who are not wearing masks. So I like Golden Guy. It's not a fancy experience. Like I said, these shops are very cozy and kind of primitive. But it's a good chance to talk with the locals and sort of find out what people are thinking, because there'll be lots of sort of average people in there, and the fact that there's only 4 or 5 people in this tiny bar, you can hear what everyone's saying, and people will ask you questions, and you sort of get to know people. It's very communal, I would say. One thing, positive or negative, is that this area used to be completely unknown to foreigners. When I found out about it, maybe 5 years ago, there were no foreigners here at all. And now it's become sort of a tourist spot, and you probably find almost as many foreigners as Japanese walking around here. And it's interesting because some of the shops have embraced that and said, well, geez, we get more business. And so you'll see a few that even I love this Baltimore. You'll see a few that even put up English signs and say no cover charge and whatever, and they're trying to get foreigners. And there are other ones that have said, man, this is disrupting our vibe, because the idea is you go in this shop and you stay there and talk to people. And foreigners, first of all, they don't speak Japanese usually, so they can't talk to people, and they may be noisy and loud, and they may come in, stay for 10 minutes and then leave, and everyone's got to get up, and it's just a pain, right? So a lot of shops, some of them will have signs that say no foreigners, or one common trick I've seen is they'll say in English, members only, and Japanese people don't read English. They don't even know what that means, so they just go right in, right? But if you speak Japanese and you're respectful, you can talk your way in anywhere. It doesn't matter. So it is kind of interesting that now when you go here, there's a large amount of foreigners. I say now, but probably during the pandemic, there's not. Again, during the daytime, it's pretty much dead because they're almost all bars. There's a little map somewhere right near the entrance that shows the shops, and I think there's around 300 in total. So, but most of them, they don't really like you going in and out, right? So that's the reason why they will have a table charge or a cover charge. It's not very expensive, maybe like $5 or $10, but the idea is if you think, oh yeah, I'm going to go to 10 different bars tonight, that sort of annoys people who are in the bar. So they don't really want you to do that. So if you have to pay every time you go in, you'll probably pick one and stay there, right? One other interesting thing is that because there's so many little bars, if let's say you go to a bar that you always go to, you have a couple drinks there, and then you move to another one that you've never been to before, and then the next day you're like, oh man, I'd like to go back to that second one. I wonder where it was. You're probably not going to remember because there's just so many. Here's a Family Mart. That's a convenience store. And I think there's a restaurant here. Yep, it's a restaurant, or kind of bar actually, that one. Deathmatch. Deathmatch is one of the ones I like. Deathmatch is one of the ones that does have a lot of foreigners, but it's very interesting because the owner likes 80s movies, and he has all these VHS cassettes of, like RoboCop or Gremlins or, whatever. He has a lot of horror movies, I think, and he'll usually be playing one on the TV. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. And he looks like the Wayne from Wayne's World, to be honest. American style pub. I've never been in this particular place. So the places on the end tend to be the outliers, the places at the edges. Here's a police station, or a police box, I guess you call it. I've actually been in this one because one day on the way to work I lost my wallet, and I thought I had to go report it somewhere, and this happened to be the one that was most on my way home. So I just stopped in here and reported it, and they checked on the computer and they said, yep, we found it. The Tokyo police station has it, so you have to go down to near Tokyo Station and pick it up. So, and you can tell that the crime is not very high because most of the time the police in those police boxes really look bored. I kind of feel like, if even in Kabukicho most of the time the police are sitting in there bored, it's almost kind of pitiful because they have nothing to do. But to be sure, there's stuff that goes on. There's, if nothing else, there's drunk people. I've seen some videos on YouTube taken of wannabe Yakuza type people who are kind of mouthing off to the cops, like, "What are you doing? Get out of my way!" kind of thing. And dealing with that's just got to be a pain. So here's another convenience store, Lawson. Docomo shop, that's a cell phone shop. Gusto, that's kind of a diner. We call them family restaurants. So this is sort of back to the main drag and heading back towards Kabukicho, back towards the station. So I should point out that the Golden Gai area is not really considered part of Kabukicho. It's next to Kabukicho. But just walking around Kabukicho is not that big, so I can't make a really long video out of that, right? Okay, so this is back to the street where City Hall is, so I'm going to go ahead and turn left here and go across the street. So across the street right now you can see this building. It says in katakana Piccadilly. This is a movie theater. On the first floor it has this Muji, which is I'm not sure what you would compare it to in the US, but it's kind of like IKEA or something like that. It's Muji literally means no mark or no brand, but it's sort of become a brand. So they sell kind of no frills stuff. Like most of their stuff, it's like, for example, white or clear. They don't have big fancy embellishments or whatever. So I think they sell a little bit of clothes, but mostly they sell stuff like furniture, Tupperware, or whatever. Okay, so this is a parking place for Subnad, which is the underground mall. We see here Baskin Robbins, Sanrio, which is the Hello Kitty shop. I don't think I've ever noticed that before. We'll turn left here and go back towards the station a little bit. You can see there's always construction going on. Like wherever you are in Japan, if it's in the city, there's always construction going on. There's always something being... You would think, like, okay, everything's filled in, so there wouldn't be construction, but there's always something being torn down and rebuilt. Here's a shop called Komehyo. That's basically used stuff. It's always a good idea to buy used stuff in Japan. You'll pay much less than you will for new stuff, and the quality is always going to be basically like new. On the left there was a seafood restaurant. There's a noodle restaurant on the left there. what else do we have here? Okay, so kind of got bored with that video, so I started taking another video at nighttime, and we're going to walk around sort of the other side so that you can see a little bit more. But right now, this is sort of the Kabukicho area here, and I just wanted to show you, like, it really does look different at night because everything sort of lights up. I'm not going to go back and walk down the small little alleys, but I have other videos where I'm riding bike around that you can take a look at that. So, you know, you can see there's still plenty of people around. Even at 2 or 3 a.m., there's actually still a lot of people around. So you're never kind of really super alone. Matsumoto Kyoji, this is a drugstore, which doesn't fill prescriptions, so I don't know what kind of drugstore you call that, but, you know, they sell over-the-counter medications. So this is, again, this street is sort of the main drag, like right outside Kabukicho. So I'm going to turn left here and go back towards the station. You can see on our right side there's a Family Mart there. Promise, that's a card loan place. Then there's a bar on our right. So on the left we have another Komehyo. This one sells watches. So yeah, I mean, they sell expensive watches, so maybe a watch that would normally be $10,000, they're selling used for only $6,000 or whatever. Yeah, crazy, right? Kirin City, this is a beer restaurant, or whatever, bar, I guess you could say. It's a restaurant, though. They have food. So you can see it's not really as seedy or scary as one would expect when you hear the term, oh, it's a red light district, or oh, it's a big city, or whatever. This is a darts bar on the left here, clothing shop. Yeah, this place that says B is a darts bar. So, like, they have drinks and snacks, and you can play darts. So this little sign here is for Tokyo Metro, the subway. And we go back to this street. So now we're pretty much out of Kabukicho, and we're just right in front of the station. So I'm going to go down to the Bikuro area. But first I want to go over here because you can see they have this cute little kind of New Year's decoration. You see the lights look like Mount Fuji. See if I can get it a little bit better positioned. Like this blue and white light thing here, I think that's supposed to be Mount Fuji. Yeah, for sure it is. And this place that says Lumine EST, so that's actually the mall on top of the Shinjuku train station. And you can see the little green and white lettering near the traffic light there that says JR Shinjuku, Japan Rail Shinjuku. You can also see sort of on the other side of the station there's Odakyu department store and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. So this is sort of the large intersection right in front of the train station, just like Shibuya Crossing. There's usually less people here than Shibuya, though, because it's just not quite as big. This sign here on the left says Big Camera, so that is, you know, an electronics store. And this is like a smaller shop that they have. So I would say, you know, if you want to buy something that every store has, sure, you can buy it here, but you can also just go down the street a little bit to Bikuro, which is where I'm going to take you, because that's a much larger one. On the left side there was this ABC Mart sign. That is a shoe store. It's kind of funny. The lady was using her phone and she dropped it, but it fell into her bike basket, so saved by the bell, right? Yeah, and this street here in Shinjuku is sort of where all the brand shops are, so you see like a Coach and Gucci and, you know, whatever. Here's another Tokyo Metro sign. So there's an entrance to the subway around here. There's another drugstore, Sun Drug. It's another karaoke place. I mean, seriously, drugstores, karaoke shops, and convenience stores you will find in pretty much every block. Okay, this looks like Megane Ichiba. yeah, this is a glasses shop. If you want to buy glasses. Skechers, that's a brand shop for shoes. Matsumoto Kyoshi again. One reason there's so many drugstores is because a lot of Chinese tourists come to Japan and they want to buy makeup and over-the-counter drugs. And so the stores are just inundated sometimes. So a lot of times they'll have extra stores around where the tourists are. In Yurekcho, for example, there's like a store just for foreigners. That's how many foreigners come and buy stuff. Like they have a store just for foreigners where the staff can speak Chinese or whatever. So this is the Bikuro, which is a combination of a Uniqlo clothing store and Big Camera in one store, which is kind of interesting because I don't think one is owned by the other or anything like that. So yeah, this is what Kabukicho looks like during the daytime, but I hear you say, what does it look like at nighttime? So I'm going to switch to some footage taken from my bike where I ride into Kabukicho and around a little bit so you can see what it looks like around, let's say 2 a.m. or whatever time this footage was taken. So while we're doing that, I want to talk a little bit about the types of crime that might occur in Kabukicho. So as you can probably tell from watching the previous video, there's not thugs roaming around with knives stabbing people. There's no gun violence going on. Even the Yakuza is too scared to carry guns because they're, basically speaking, highly illegal, and if you get caught with the gun, then your life is over, right? So what you probably will hear about is something called botakuri. Botakuri means ripoff. So there are ripoff shops where they will try to target people and say, come into my shop. Then you go into the shop and, you get charged a lot of money. So, for example, a rather tame example of this would be some of these massage places. And, there'll be some ladies walking around and they'll say, hey, just 3,000 yen, just 5,000 yen. You can get a massage, and you might say, okay. And then you get in there, and then they probably will say, oh, why don't you get the oil service for another 5,000 yen, or why don't you do this, or why don't you extend your stay for another hour or whatever. And you end up spending 100 or 150 or 200 or whatever the case may be. Now, of course, they're not going to force you to stay. They're not going to force you to spend the money. They're just taking advantage of the fact that people are drunk, right? Probably a more extreme example would be there may be some shops where, they don't really tell you how much things cost, and they say, oh, why don't you stay for a couple hours, and then you leave and your bill's like, $1,000 or something crazy like that. Now, again, it's unlikely they're really going to use violence to force you to pay, but, if they have some big scary looking person there, and even you say you don't have the money, they say, oh, well, we'll walk you to the ATM and make sure you get the money, don't worry. You may end up spending more than you wanted to. You may feel pressured to spend money. I've heard stories from different people about it. And there's just the reality that people are non-confrontational, and if they feel like, oh man, I got overcharged, they'll probably just still pay it anyway and just avoid going back there, right? Some places may specifically target foreigners, but it's not something specific to foreigners, right? There's plenty of Japanese unscrupulous bars and whatnot. So some advice: first of all, don't follow touts into shops. If there's a tout outside trying to get you into a shop, just don't go. Second of all, if they say, oh, it's only X dollars, then you tell them, hey, that's all I have. So make sure if you're going to charge them anything more, let me know beforehand. Otherwise, I'm not paying. And if they do try and charge you extra, just tell them you're not going to pay it and you'll go to the police, right? Because nobody wants that trouble. They'll just let you go in 9 out of 10 cases. I've heard stories where people claimed, like, oh, they must have drugged me. They must have made me tell them my PIN number for my ATM card. I mean, I really doubt it. Who knows? But chances are you're not going to get in a bar fight. You're not going to get stabbed. You're not going to get beat. You're not going to get raped. It's just, if you're drinking and having fun, just go home after that. Don't go from shop to shop and progressively go to more and more shady places. And if you are going to go to some place that's a little bit shady, just make sure that you know what you're doing and you know what your budget is and you know what they're going to charge you. You know, not to be racist, but most of the time, if you see some Nigerian guy or something, they're out there to rip you off, right? That's basically what they do. Most of the massage places, it'll be like Chinese ladies. Again, they're not going to really rip you off, but they will kind of try and lure you in with low prices and then charge you more. If somebody asks you for cash on the street ahead of time, like, oh, just give me $200 now and then I'll go, take you to this bar or introduce you to this girl or whatever, just don't do it, right? There's no legitimate business that'll ask you to hand cash to a person outside. So, with regard to, well, where are the really dangerous places? It's not Kabukicho. Kabukicho has lots of people that would be witnesses. It has lots of police presence. It's just, nothing too crazy is really going to go down. But where might actually be dangerous? So one place is Roppongi. Roppongi is where a lot of foreigners go to play, and honestly, you can get into fights with other patrons there. Right? It's much more likely that a foreigner will think it's acceptable to have a bar fight or whatever than a Japanese person would, right? So you might get into fights with other customers in Roppongi. I have not really seen it happen too often, but occasionally I've seen it happen, right? What else? Drugs are a big no-no in Japan. So you might think, it's just a little bit of weed, it's just a little bit of coke, whatever. No, you will definitely go to jail if you get caught doing drugs. Probably for a very long time. If you're a foreigner, you'll go to jail for a very long time, and then you'll be deported and not allowed back into Japan for 10 years or something, right? I know someone that happened to their husband, for a very small amount of drugs. So there are these so-called designer drugs that are legal, at least used to be legal, but even then, I've heard doctors come on TV and say, to be perfectly honest with you, you're safer taking a real drug than taking these designer drugs because nobody knows what these are, nobody knows what kind of poison might be in them, nobody knows how pure they are, nobody knows what the antidote is if you have an overdose. So for safety reasons, you should stay away from that stuff, and for obvious reasons, legal reasons. I've not seen, any sort of drug-related stuff go on in Kabukicho other than like where I said before there were shops that used to sell the designer drugs, but that's been cleaned up. In Roppongi, you might have customers who are asking for this stuff. You might have some, shady strip bars or whatever that'll supply it to people that ask for it, and you don't even want to be on the premises where something like that's going on, right? Because that will invite the police, right? And then you'll be stuck for questioning with everybody else. So to be honest, if you're talking about being ripped off, then yeah, if you go to the wrong shop and you don't know how to handle yourself in Kabukicho, you could be ripped off. But if you're just going to normal restaurants and bars, you're not following touts into shady places, then honestly, you're probably not going to get ripped off. I think part of the reason they have these, information centers is because even if you have to pay a little bit of a premium, when they introduce you to some place, that place is probably going to be safe, as opposed to just talking to some random person on the street. Obviously I can't vouch for that, but I believe that's part of the reason. So where might actually be dangerous? Where might actual violent crimes happen? So from what I've heard talking to people that live in Tokyo, Again, people who live outside of Tokyo, they might just think, well, you know, Roppongi is dangerous, or Kabukicho is dangerous, or some shady part of Ikebukuro is dangerous. But in reality, the places where something, physical is likely to happen is where there's not so many witnesses around, where there's not so many people, where there's not so many police. So, in the extreme countryside, it's unlikely, and in a crowded area like this, it's unlikely. But in sort of the fringe areas is where, honestly, you have to worry. That's where Japanese people have told me they feel the most vulnerable if you're walking alone, for example, at night. So that would be places like, for example, some part of Adachiku or something where, let's say I knew this girl. She lived probably 15 minutes walk from the train station, and it was kind of along a highway. There's nobody around. If she comes back late at night, so she used to be like drinking at Winnow until late at night, and then she'd take the last train home. And when she's walking home, there's nobody around, and it's just cars, and she didn't feel safe because, hey, somebody could do something bad, and there would be no one to see it or hear it or whatever. So, if that perception is accurate, then those kind of places might be the kind of places to avoid. So, I think Japan is probably the safest country in the world, if not one of the safest countries. I mean, you see this so-called, dangerous area here that is clearly not so dangerous. I mean, I have been to Kabukicho at night, at 11 p.m., at 3 a.m., at 5 a.m., all the time. No problems whatsoever. I leave my bike locked up outside here all the time, overnight, right? Nothing happens to it, not a scratch, no missing seat, nothing. So it's really, if this is the worst Japan has to offer, then it's really not that bad, I have to say. It doesn't mean that crime doesn't happen. Crime happens, right? People do get murdered occasionally. Maybe not in Kabukicho, but it does happen, right? People do get beat up occasionally. People do get ripped off all the time, I'm sure. People do get raped occasionally. Some bad stuff does happen, but it's not necessarily in an area like Kabukicho. And the thing that is most likely to happen here is that you will get ripped off if you're not careful, right? I mean, and that's not good, obviously. We want to prevent that sort of thing from happening, but it's also not the worst thing in the world, and it's not anywhere near as bad as some other countries. So it kind of cracks me up because Japanese people are very risk adverse, and I've had people that I know from Kansai tell me, oh, you should be careful and don't go to Roppongi or don't go to Kabukicho because it's so super dangerous. And I'm like, guys. When I went to college, I lived in Philadelphia. You do not want to be walking around the wrong part of Philadelphia at night. And I was probably pretty, brave or stupid in that I would walk around shady areas of Philadelphia at night. But that's the kind of area where not only do people get shot, but like police get shot. Right? Bad stuff happens. People get stabbed and killed and raped, and there's gun violence and all kind of stuff. Compared to that, I think Japan is super safe, even Kabukicho. So, I just wanted to show you guys what's going on and talk about it a little bit, and, make your own decisions and let me know what you think. Have a good day.